have a special guest, Brad McGinty, aka FreeRolls_DFS. And for those of you that have been with me for a while, I always like to have people on whose content I respect and content I think is really, really worth listening to, both from an educational perspective and very, I don't want to say entertaining in the more demeaning way, because sometimes they can come off the wrong way. But it's very intelligent. It's very, it's very sharp. He's a really good writer, in addition to, I mean, probably a whole lot of other skills that I don't have as far as creativity. We'll get into some of that, and hopefully we'll have some time to go over the LEC stuff, because I really want to ask him a lot of questions about his history and stuff like that. And as you guys know, I love to just kind of share my findings and who I kind of follow with you guys. So, Brad, welcome. And I didn't even know you. You've been on kind of the show tour, I guess, recently, like talking more than you have. Why don't you give me a little history about who you are and where you came from and all that stuff?
Oh, man. I have a background in when I was really young, I got a weird job right out of high school where I started working in radio. And then I parlayed that to working for like an ESPN radio affiliate. And then just like a bunch of work in that vein, worked in TV, radio, and everything for a while. Oh, you found the old podcast, man. So this is like, we'll just skip way ahead. Basically what happened is in 2011, I put like $20 on FanDuel and was just like, lost it immediately. Was like, this is rigged. This is just BS. I can't do it. And then around 2016, 2017, I found this guy who was writing, who was a great writer, who's no longer around, Brian Tulloch. And he was writing about DFS, and it just like really inspired me. And I had this idea. I go, can I just enter all these free rolls that he's posting every day and see if I can turn that into something? And back then it was kind of soft, and I got real lucky and started developing a strategy. And so then I had started this podcast, which is like completely dead now. I don't do anything with it. But I had to go in and recently and add an episode to take episodes out. But in 2019, while I'm doing this podcast about free stuff, DraftKings used to do free rolls for League of Legends. And so in 2019, I did a podcast called How to Win at League of Legends Without Knowing Anything About It. And it was dumb. It was really dumb, but it was really prescient also, because something happened in 2020. I don't remember what, but suddenly League of Legends ended up being a large DFS sport, and I just happened to be slightly ahead of the majority of the field coming into it. And honestly, like in my DFS story, that's it in a nutshell, because all anybody really wants from me are League of Legends projections and charts.
Do you play a lot?
I do. So I play every sport. Sometimes I'll post. I was just talking to a guy about NHL this morning, but I'll post NHL charts occasionally, and anywhere where I can find an edge. NBA tiers, I think, is probably like the most slept on product that is available on DraftKings. Like, everybody should be playing tiers. You don't really have to do as much thinking. It gives you the opportunity to still close out those Iron Man achievements, and it's really, really, really soft.
Well, let me jump around a little bit. So the first sport that you mentioned that you also post stuff on was hockey, and one of the reasons I got into DFS, one of the interesting components to it, and something I think about a lot, is the difference between how all sports kind of distribute their results, and which sports are more in tune with mega correlation, and what sports are in tune with no correlation, right? And the fact that you mentioned both League of Legends and hockey just kind of immediately just hit me in the head, because as I speak about all the time, I mean, I think League of Legends is probably the most correlative sport there is in the world, right? I mean, like, you have to, that's for sure. And then I think hockey is probably second. So is it just by accident that you like hockey and League of Legends, or I'm trying to like create something that does?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, first and foremost, I'm a baseball guy. Like
real
real life, I love baseball. Like I was a contractor for the San Diego Padres for a while in the early 2000s. Like, I've done all of my time in Major League Baseball. Like, it's the greatest sport. People should love it. I'm not great at MLB DFS, and I feel like there's not as much edge there for somebody like me who's playing at a lower level. But like when I started playing League of Legends in 2019 for DFS, people weren't even correlating lineups. It's like so difficult to explain what people were doing. But if there was like a Saturday morning slate for LEC or LCS, people would pick like one player from each team projected to win. And that's how people are doing it. And so immediately I was like, oh, this is the trick. We're like, we can beat this. We'll just correlate. And hockey to this point too, in larger GPPs, it's not as important to correlate weirdly. Like eventually the field's going to come around on this. But in smaller events, NHL is really the correlation is champion. So these are easier sports to project if you're like a data person.
Not to embarrass you, by the way, but as I brought him into the stream, I was clicking through some of his sites and stuff like that just to kind of see what I can display. And I got to one of his tabs was his podcast. Oh my God, you found that thing? And he was just talking about that. And believe it or not, I went a little deeper, and there was a podcast he did back for like a long time ago, where he talked about how to win at League of Legends. And he referred to it in a subsequent podcast where he says, please don't listen to this. It's awful, but I have to put something up to like keep the site going or something like that. So I said, you know what? I can't resist. I have to go back to something like this because, listen, remember I talked about I used to do old poker videos, and I love going back to what I did in 2012 to see how terrible it might have been. You know, so when he said, "Oh, don't watch this," of course the elephant, the pink elephant in the room. Now I have to go listen to it, and he basically was saying, this is like before. You think about this, before anybody even knew to do this. He was saying, just play 4 players from one team, 3 from the other, probably an underdog, and then make sure you put ADC in the captain, and you're probably going to be okay. And the funny thing is yes, okay, obviously it's gotten much harder than that, whatever it is. But as you're saying, that even before that, people didn't even know how to do that.
Yeah, it's like one of the biggest struggles is like when we think about DFS, there's like a championship meta. There's like a way to build lineups that is eventually going to dominate how we win. And like in late 2019, early 2020, League of Legends, there was still a big struggle with that. But it solidified quickly. I mean, once like Alex Baker and you and everybody else started getting into these that really is like real winners, you guys were really able to define the field extremely well. I think NHL still has a lot of meat on the bone, though. I think people haven't really found that. And I'm excited, hopefully, for that to continue to be supported for another year or so. I mean, we'll see where DFS is headed. I actually have some pretty bleak thoughts on it. But for right now, I'm just really enjoying a pretty good year with League of Legends and everything else.
Do you play League of Legends?
No. I had never played a game until I did not download League of Legends or learn anything about it until after I won my first Shock Blast in like early 2020.
Because it's interesting, everybody I speak to that does DFS in any degree, they usually fall within a couple of different categories. One are people that like played the thing and then decided they wanted to bet on it. Some other people like to bet on it, then just decided to like the thing, and some people are just data point guys and say, I don't even care what the hell these things are. I'm just betting on them, whatever it is. So you're the type that you weren't like a League of Legends kid growing up. You started betting on it and then kind of got into it afterwards.
Yeah, well, 1, I'm too old, right? So first off, but 2, yeah, it's one where I started betting on it and mostly DFS, and then started betting once I realized that you could actually bet on it. And then I started learning more about it. And honestly, it has made me worse. Like learning things about the game, understanding champions, looking at champion pools, like really learning information, playing the game, getting an idea for structures and meta inside of the game has probably made me a worse DFS player, maybe a better, but yeah, it was one where I thought, okay, we'll look at this, and if I feel like there's a little bit to learn and I feel like the competition is soft enough, I'm not smarter than anybody. I'm like, I'm the dumbest person in every lobby, but if I can win a little bit of money, that's my goal, and then I need to figure out how to maximize that against the field.
Well, let's. I'm glad DFS PhD is bringing this up because I want to get into this a little bit. And I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't even know what your real skill set is, so we're going to get into that a little bit. You know, did you ever do like? Are you a data guy? And when I asked that, did you ever do any actual homework on what types of lineups actually win? You know what I mean? It seems like that things are instinctive, like what should win, what shouldn't win. You would think that mostly 4-3s would win. You would think that mostly ADCs should score the most points, but they'd be more duped, so it's more likely that maybe something else. Did you ever do any work on that, or you just kind of okay? So what did you when you looked into that?
Yeah, and I continue to do. So like you'll see me post on Twitter a lot of times, not every slate, but if I find it interesting, I'll post this was the optimal lineup versus what won the main GPP, or this is the optimal lineup versus, you know, the most popular lineup. And the reason is because I do pretty regularly track optimals because I'm looking for correlation patterns. So one of the things is like on a 2-game slate, and it's heavily region dependent. On a 2-game slate for Western, so LEC, LCS, overwhelmingly we're looking for a 4-3. So today it's almost certainly going to be a 4-3. It's about 80% to be a 4-3.
Yeah, but does it matter whether you're in just, you know, single games or 2 of 3 like you have today?
Well, it does. You're actually in single games. You theoretically can see outliers more often. So in a single game series where you have, let's talk about LCS. LCS has 4, used to be 5, but 4 best of 1 games. You're more likely to see an outlier from a losing team. Like yesterday, we saw Berserker from Cloud9 was in the optimal, even though they technically lost. And in fact, there might have been, I think Blaber also might have. But you're going to see more likely because you can have games that Fiesta, and you can have games where, like right now in the meta, you can have a top laner that separates themselves on a losing team because so many top lanes are really static, you know, where you have a lot of Udyr or just champions that aren't getting a lot of kills and assists and are really isolated in laning. Like it's pretty granular, but correlation for a 4-3 as a general rule is if it's a 2-game slate or a showdown, I mean, obviously showdown, but if it's a 2-game slate, a 4-3 is pretty likely to be the optimal and most likely to win. But like on a larger slate, you're almost always the optimal is going to contain a different buildup. It'll be like a 4-2-1 or a 3-3-1.
Okay, now we get into what's really important here is making money, right? So it's obvious that like a 4-3 is going to be most likely to be optimal, but the real question is what makes the most money. So this is what was interesting until about a year ago. The field sizes grew. They gave bigger guarantees or whatever it is, and at first, and I said, oh, that's great. You know what I mean? Like, that's terrific. More guarantees, more money, and whatever. But what happens is that where it used to be, even for the LPL slates, you have like a maximum lineup, so you could put in like 20, 25 lineups. Now you could put in like 47 lineups, sometimes more. So what would happen is people would come in and max enter and cover a lot of those, you know, those outlier, even 4-2-1s, 4-2 whatevers. So it was difficult. It was a little more difficult, but I also found that people just played a lot of lineups that, even though unique, just were hopelessly, just had no chance. You know, and that's really the thing about DFS, right? Is trying to figure out how to get a unique lineup that has a shot. You know what I mean? And the way League of Legends works is the top, you know, 4-3 or whatever, you're going to get like 40 dupes or, you know, whatever it is in like the bigger ones. And there's just no universe, in my opinion, that's going to ever be 40 times more likely to hit than some of than some 4-3s that you can get to, right? That are unique. What do you? I mean, have you looked at, like, I don't know. I mean, about whether it matters whether you play 4-3s with someone the captain, whether is what I used to think about it. This is whatever is. If I'm going to play 4-3s, I'd like to play the ones that don't look as pretty. And this is before I really get into the numbers, right? Like, you have the 4 right in a row and then the 3 at the end. You know what I mean? Like, those are the ones that people are going to get to the most, as opposed to some captain support team in 3 and then the other 4 or whatever. Did you ever get that much into the weeds of exactly what type of 4-3s are more likely to be unique or anything like that? And if you didn't, that's fine. But these are just the questions I come up with.
No, because it's almost all pricing related, and DraftKings moves the pricing around a lot. So like LPL, LCK slates, the pricing tends to be a little more difficult, whereas we'll see sometimes really soft pricing for LEC, LCS. So it really is pricing dependent, because that's going to determine if you want to play favorites, who you can get in the captain slot. And sometimes it'll be set up so that favorites you can put in ADC, but sometimes the pricing will be that you can only get to support as a captain. And so I haven't really tracked it, but what I can say is that, like, your original assertion where that most duped lineup is extremely unlikely to hit is 100% correct. On a 2-game slate especially, or even a 3-game slate, though those are kind of rare, your best bet is usually to play ownership over projections over anything else, is to just really try and get a feel for ownership by hopping into Discords, talking about people. If you have the ability to that have assets that project ownership, like for your members, that's definitely something that I would highly recommend people look more at on shorter slates. Over time, that's going to be your greatest way to win money on short slates. And
All right.
it's like not even close.
So let's talk about projections for a minute, because I'm really interested in them. I track projections across the whole industry in all the sports, and I compare them, I back test them, and I aggregate them, and I compare who does best. You can't compare actual projections, but ownership projections you can really because if you project something for 12 and it's 18, you missed, right? You can't say you projected a team for 30 fantasy points, they got 50, so you were wrong. You know what I mean? Like, there's a median is whatever. But I'm very interested in the way projections are compiled, and I compare different projection sets I get, and I always look at them. And one thing, and I was talking to I'll throw his name. I was talking to James McCool, who wrote Theory of DFS. He co-wrote Theory of DFS. I was talking the other day about his own League of Legends projections, the eSport projections, and I wanted to. And here's one thing I noticed: there are some sports, and League of Legends is one of them, and MMA sometimes, where the median projection, yes, you put out the median projection, but you really separate the projection in win versus projection in loss. Okay. And it's an interesting way to think about it, right? Because like I talked about with MMA, like sites put out median projections, and at LOL, sites put out median projections, even though the median projection will almost never actually happen. You know what I mean? Like, it's the median's never going to be the mode to call a statistic, right? Yeah. But yet they put them out anyway, and there's some sites that for MMA, they'll put out, for example, score and win, right? And for League of Legends, I do see more people trying to do that, points in win versus points in loss and stuff like that. Talk about why you do it that way, and talk about how you factor in the fact that, okay, it's great that you could project XYZ in a win, but you still have to factor in the chance that they win, right? So talk to me a little bit about your projections, if this is not too granular.
No, this is great, man. Love to do it. So in 2020, I had a bunch of people reach out to me, and I started providing picks and projections for, I don't know what we would call them, niche DFS providers. People who give a little more than is probably allowed in the terms of service for DraftKings. And so I was basically handing them over projections and my picks and going, here's who I think is going to win, and here's kind of where I think they're going to score at. And then they would build the lineup, so that this was never going to be an issue for me. But then I started to post them publicly, and I was posting just like my projections. Here's what I think is going to happen on the slate. And someone messaged me and just was straight up like, oh, hey, if I want to play the dog in this matchup, who should I play? And I was like, oh, what am I doing? Like, why am I only posting the stuff that I think is going to win? Like, I can just give people my opinion separately. And this is what I do is I'll be like, oh, here's my picks. And then I'll post my projections based on the outcomes. So like the one you have up there, it's got like, that's a best of 3. So it's got like, oh, if this team wins 2-0, here's where I expect these players to score at. And because it's a projection, like the numbers are imaginary. What the numbers that I use, my projection system, and most projection systems for League of Legends are really based on trying to determine how many kills there are going to be, and then how those kills and assists are dispersed throughout the team.
Yep.
And so my numbers will be wrong a lot, but the correlation for them is really what I'm shooting for. So you know who will be the most likely highest scorer, and then how that will filter out through the rest of the team.
So to give you an example, by the way, this is a question that people that I saw that people asked, and I saw you answered this once before. For those of you that look at this stuff, like the difference here between these two numbers, I mean, it's really easy, but some people get really, really confused for some reason. So when you say projected kills and wins, it's 18. It's almost like implied goals. You know what I mean? Because then it says projected combined kills. This just basically means that in top esports wins, they're going to get 8 and the opponent's going to get 8.5. I mean, like,
do you want to pull up it should be my pinned post, the ones for today?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I mean, if it's not, like, yeah,
it's fine.
Like, just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like over there on the right-hand column, far right, that's what you're talking about. And you'll see that's kind of weird because it shows that I'm projecting 29 combined kills in that bottom one. So my model is like, oh, hey, when Mad wins, it's real scruffy. It's going to be like 19-10, 20-9. Like these are really chippy games that they could lose early in fights. And I feel like that's important information for people to have rather than me just going, oh, here's like where I think people are going to score at. And so people can make their own decisions. Like I'm not out here to be making decisions for anybody. People like you are consistently making better decisions. And I know that because when I log into Twitter after the slate closes, you're posting about how you won a bunch of money and I'm not. So, you know, I feel like it's best to just give the best information and let people.
But you know what? But Twitter is really odd because I put up my every time I lose, but it doesn't seem to go onto Twitter for some reason. I think Twitter seems to X out all my screenshots where I lose everything on these slates. So I gotta email Twitter about that. So we'll see. Yeah. So this is now. I guess I'll ask you this: when you come up with projections, do you know? Because I know that like SaberSim, they allegedly. I say allegedly because I just love to see like the hand history. So they like run game sims or whatever it is, and that's how they come up with their projections. Okay, that's what they say. So I'm gonna live with it. And other places do. I don't know how they do it. They do average, then like they do it, and other places they'll do their fundamental takes on top of it. Do you just have like you're just so much knowledge of the teams that you can just make these projections? Or
anybody can do this.
How do you handle it?
Yeah, literally anybody can do this. There's Thames Venhausen is a data analyst for League of Legends, and I believe he currently works for an LCS team. He has a website called Oracle's Elixir that he posts all of the data that's available from every match, from every region.
Oracle Elixir?
Oracle's Elixir. And highly recommended if you're really interested in getting the data of League of Legends. He doesn't update it a ton because it's he updates the data a lot, but the interface and everything isn't great because it's a passion project, but it's an incredible asset. And everybody who makes projections pulls their information from this. Every single person. It's like not even close. There's nobody doing this. I'm always worried I'm going to log in one day and this will be gone. but yeah, it's what I do is I pull information out of it. There's specific data that I'm looking for. And then I use a really basic spreadsheet model to determine from the specific data that I use. I have crafted a formula that helps me to determine essentially game speed, but really it's how many kills to expect. And then once we have those kills for the games, dependent on who wins, then we can go back through the data and say, okay, in wins, if there's X number of kills, how are those kills distributed? And right now we're in kind of a weird spot. At the beginning of the split, I was doing really well because it's hard to build a projection model. And I have a smoother that has shown really great consistency at the beginning of splits to take old data and bring it in. Towards the end of the split or the season, I'll be doing really well because I'll have the maximum amount of data. Right now, trying to correlate my smoothed old data with the data from this split and the current meta and get those to mesh together, it's really the hardest spot to project right now. I still feel like I'm doing well, but you know, I'm always
we'll get into a discussion of what it means to be doing well is also, because when I and this is tough about DFS, Brad, is you have to judge your results before the slate starts. You know what I mean? Like you have to judge it right after lock and before the results come in, especially in sports like this, because if you can get like a good portfolio of unique or close to unique lineups that project decently, you've already sort of won. You know what I mean? If the sample size in DFS is so small that if you're just not quote unquote winning for like a long time, you still could be playing well. It's difficult, to judge that, and that would be my advice from someone who does portfolio management for a living and deals with this kind of stuff. But let me ask you this: you mentioned the start of a new meta. So what that means, I guess, is each split they fiddle around with the code of League of Legends, right? Of the maps. And I guess that they reward certain things like a little more. There's little things that reward certain type of play that people that teams are either prepared for or not prepared for, I guess, and they have to adjust kind of along the way. I guess that's the first question I have. I've never felt to ask this question. When there's like a meta change, do the teams or the professional teams know what that's going to be beforehand and prepare for it? Or do they just come out and play and say, yo, what the hell, what these guys do? And then they just kind of adjust along the way.
Yeah. Generally, they have an idea of what they're going to do and what their strategy is going to be for major changes. But it does vary depending on how Riot drops the patches, how much knowledge they have ahead of time, as well as their ability to scrim and really develop. And also, it's difficult for these teams because they're in competition with each other, but they're also at a certain level when you talk about scrimming and developing their own team-based strategies and how they have to do that. So even the best teams with the best coaches can often get caught off guard by a meta shift because their player or their coaches just didn't think about a certain way to approach champions in that lane. Like, I think it's a little bit granular because like in reality, we're talking about professionals who are going to sort it out. So when we start looking at meta and like Bradley posted in the chat this idea that like captain in LCK LPL has shifted from ADC to jungle and mid. And like when we talk about a meta shift, that's really the stuff we're looking for. When we look at DFS or betting or props, it's trying to get ahead on that and say after a couple of matches, okay, what we're seeing is the teams who are winning more decisively they're really playing a lot more through the jungle, or we're seeing a lot less of Sejuani, which is a champion that isn't very good usually for DFS. That last year was a very common jungle pick.
Yeah, we have a guy who's our resident League of Legends expert, DFS
Chan. Yeah, he's great. Yeah. Like I love his videos. He's fantastic.
He's really, and he knows he's not as good like as I am with like the lineup construction and like that type of piece. But he's like really good with the fundamental piece, and you know, you combine those two things. It's kind of cool. And he mentioned to me, like, for example, I mean, I wouldn't know an ADC from a support. You know what I mean? I don't know how to play, but he mentioned, for example, that the new meta, whatever, that the support was just for whatever reason it was set up for them to get more action or more kills or more whatever, and whether it was coincidence or not, but these supports have been putting up numbers. You know, they've a couple of slates they've been optimal, but even when they haven't been, they've been consistently putting up more points than the top position, and sometimes more than whatever. And I guess being early on that, I suppose, it's probably pretty important.
Well, it's riding a wave. So like early on, we were seeing a lot of double support meta. Now we're going to see that when I say double support, that means support at captain and then another support. Okay. We were seeing a lot of double support meta. And as pricing comes, I think we'll continue to see that because supports who play certain champions are going to score very well based on playstyle. But if pricing allows it, we're going to see a lot more jungle. And in the last 2 weeks, we've seen 3 slates where the optimal was a top captain. Really quietly, and I haven't posted any of these online, but really quietly, we've seen top captain actually end up being the optimal because of pricing. And so it is riding a wave of knowing when we're going to have it be a support captain meta, or when it's going to be jungle, and that is going to change as teams adjust. And for support, the guy to always watch in my mind, who I think is the greatest in the world at support, is this guy Carrier, who has not been performing as well, whose team has not been really putting him in that position. And I think they're ahead. I mean, they're the best team in the world. That's T1. And I think they're ahead of everyone else. And what we're going to see is a shift off of that, and jungle and ADC. Jungle is going to stay at the top, and then ADC slowly going to come up to meet them.
I mentioned SaberSim a couple of times, and regardless, regardless of whether you know, I mean, TrueDFS has obviously supported them, and I know Andy, who is the CEO of them, back from the poker days, like a long time ago, like before SaberSim and DFS even existed. So I've been kind of using them for like a long time, and I was. You know, listen, I was very successful at DFS, just kind of using their stuff and using their sims and just building 4-3s, and you know, and sometimes taking money off the table, sometimes doing whatever while I was kind of learning whatever. And now though, we have this new world of contest sims, okay, which have permeated most of the industry, where in addition to creating projections, sites you create a field of lineups that you compare your lineups to try to, you know, figure out which of your lineups do well against that proposed field of lineups, so you get a little more leverage and stuff like that. And that has dominated the football streets, the basketball streets, now hockey and baseball when it started out. And League of Legends, because it is because it doesn't pay as much, right? It hasn't really, you know, taken on, you know, hasn't absorbed as much revenue from the big sites to develop contest sims for that sport yet. However, like SaberSim does, and they run contest sims. Have you? And I'm gonna do this when I build my lineups right now. Okay, how have you looked at that? Have you thought of that? Because this is a constant battle in League of Legends, and all sports, but specifically League of Legends, to come up with good lineups that are not going to be duped 100 times. You know?
Yeah. Okay, so like this idea of sims for other sports, right, where you have a theoretical amount of lineups in like NFL is like, you know the sims in NFL are going to really put you over. In League of Legends, what you're really simming is you're just simming against expected ownership.
Right.
Because like and the smaller the slate is, I think that those tools, and like, this is not to speak badly of SaberSim, which makes a great product. I have like no issue with them.
That's just like, put it aside. I mean, I have no problem. I would say
But
trash.
like,
I have no problem criticizing their models and stuff. So tell me
and
what.
like we're gonna see Saber Sim guys up at the top all the time for League of Legends contests, but that's largely based on the idea that they're producing good lineups, and they tend to be more likely to enter multiple lineups, and those are really going to be the strategies for League of Legends that get you there. I mean, like if we're real clear about it, putting one lineup in and trying to create a differentiated lineup, you would have to be so different. I used to talk about this all the time with LCK slates on Mondays or LPL slates on Mondays and Tuesdays, which is like you shouldn't play anything except double dogs. If you're going to play one lineup, just play double dogs every Monday and Tuesday, because eventually you're going to hit, you're going to be at the top, and you're going to have a very small split. And you're more likely to make money that way. If you're only playing one lineup per slate in the main, you're more likely to win money that way than by trying to build winning lineups. And like that's the thing that sims on short slates, 2-game, 3-game slates. That's really what they're what they can best do. But their systems aren't designed to do that. They're designed to give you the most likely to win versus the field. So they're trying to maximize leverage without taking 100% risk, like the 0 to 100 risk. And that I think probably is holding back some lineups. But for players who can afford the tools and who are MME players, who are max multi-entry players, like it's a great tool. But just for most players, it's like,
Well,
honestly, you just.
Oh, I'm sorry, finish.
No, I was just gonna say you just like vibe it out for short slates as much as anything. Try to build the best correlation you can. Not worry about getting duped, because if you're playing one lineup every slate, $15 every slate, splitting 40 ways is still a massive win for you. You only have to hit that every 8 or 9 times, and you're getting leverage against the field by only playing one slate, which is an insane thing to say, but it is true.
Yeah, I wouldn't live with myself if I had 40 dupes. I have what I call I do dupe push-ups. Okay, like as many dupes as I have to do that many push-ups. You know, that's just the way I'm looking at this. I want to like show you an example. All right, regarding this slate. This is like something to do sometimes. So I built 30 lineups just using Sabres and projections, just for the hell of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to see, and I can tell you in advance what it's going to show. It would show, actually not necessarily. It's going to show 100% FNC and maybe half and half of these two. But just to show you, to build 30 lineups, I'm getting actually 100% FNC and Fnatic and 100% Madcoin. Okay, and that is when you rate these guys by Sabre score, which is their equivalent of if you really dive into it, it'll show you what this is. But it's there, you know, they say this has upside, they say whatever. It does not factor into account leverage. It doesn't really take into account no dupes. This is like your top 30. And to give you an idea of what running the Sims will change, I already put the Shock Blast, actually, this is interesting. So when you put in the Shock Blast and you run it against Sabre Sim ownership, I like to see for all sports kind of like the delta between what you would get normally and what you would get when you apply contest sims. Like basketball, for example, the difference between what you would get is very, very small. Okay, and that's because it's highly projected. Everybody always makes their freaking median, and it's very difficult, you know, to get different, right? And there's almost no correlation. So here, like for example, all right, I just ran the contest sim, and when we apply the contest sim, now we'd be getting almost 50% SK, right, and 30% vitality, which it's an interesting like intellectual exercise for me. You know what I mean? Like to think about why that happened, right? And again, I don't know the internals of their algorithms, right? You know, so I don't know how this actually happened, but I can tell you that because it has to get different somehow, right? And it got to more SK and more vitality. So what I do when I run the Sims, this is comforting. You know what I mean? Like as a GPP player, I don't want to get 100% of both favorites. What do I have to do to get different? I ran the Sims. This gets me different. This feels pretty good. And this is very, very normal when you apply the sims. Now, the first thing I have to do is make sure I'm getting all 4 threes. Otherwise, I'll have to. I'm the guy that's going to X out the 4 2-1s. I know Matt Bellman's here, and he's he's awesome at all DFS sports, and he's also really, really good at DFS at League of Legends. Good in the respect that there can't be a possible way that someone has the optimal, like he has it somehow. He'll be the guy that'll play like the 4-2 sometimes, to get different, and I just don't have it in me. Maybe it's my OCD, about like I can't. I just really feel as though these 4-2-1s, they just don't win off unless you have that specific situation where you have like Gen G, who's like minus 3,000 to win, but they don't run up the score as much, and you can't get to them or whatever it is. But
conceptually, just real quick, 4-3 is your best lever. Like on a 2-game slate, you're going to play 4-3 like 90% of the time. But even on a larger slate, 4-3 is your best projected outcome and like ROI when we talk about return on investment, because it is more likely that correlation will score and move you to the top. But it's just rarely going to be the optimal. But your odds of like trying to find that one person who's different out of a pool of 80 players to get the perfect person to hit the optimal is just so low. You're trying to like find a needle in a haystack. So most people should stick straight to 4-3.
I mean, do you ever play this way? I mean, do you ever fiddle around with these things? Or are you just like comfortable with your own builds and stuff like that? I mean, you ever experimented with this?
I've played with tools. I just play at a level where like I just don't want to pay for tools.
Okay.
Like it's just how I am. That's why I build all my own tools from the ground up. And like it's a bunch of time, but this is actually what I do for a living. Like online, I'm always like, oh, I'm losing so much money. Things are bad. This is what I do for a living. So like building the tools so that I feel comfortable about it rather than pay for the tools is just like something I'm able to do because I have the time.
Yeah. So what I like to do is not think about it that way. I like to think about not firm of cost. I want to start with what the best thing, and then figure out how to pay for it later, right? But sure. Yes, if you can do that on your own, sure. That. But if like it's a question of what you want to pay versus what it gives you. Like if I knew that these sims were like perfect, right? And they would give me perfect edge, I'd pay infinite, right? If they were experimental, and there are a lot of them were experimental that are just screwing around, then I probably wouldn't pay anything, But
no, like I said, I mean, SaberSim produces a great product. In the past, I've used like Fantasy Cruncher, which for like NFL, I think makes a good product. And like some people just need an optimizer. That's why I use Fantasy Cruncher, because I just wanted an optimizer, right? If I were to buy a product now, like I know some people at SaberSim that I think their product is, for what they do, I think they're at the top of the field. And I think other people are kind of chasing behind them, but it's just not something, man, I'm just like, you don't understand. The free part of free rolls is what is really the important part here. I do not spend money if I can avoid it. I just want to extract a portion of money, and that is it. Every month I try to take as much out as I can and not put any in. And it's probably a losing philosophy long-term, because you're 100% right. If it helps you win, those are tools you should pay for, and think about it as something you're paying off on the back end as a percentage of winnings.
So I'm gonna push something else on you, something that, because DFS PhD is here, he was here, could be still here. And here's a concept that is very relevant to Showdown in all sports, specifically football, but all sports, that I sometimes think about with League of Legends. And again, it's the idea of what can you do to get different and not be hopeless, right? Or what can you get unique? There are certain things you can do. Number one is you could leave salary on the table, right? That's one thing you could do. But I've always found that that's difficult because I can't quantify how much to leave on the table. DFS PhD, he does a great job with this. He's much. Everybody's in this business is in the business saying he's smarter than me, he's smarter than me, he's smarter than me. If this particular thing, like DFS PhD is much smarter than me with tracking like how much money gets left on the table and how it drops off at certain levels and stuff like that. I encourage you to watch all his videos to learn more about that. But I wouldn't know like exactly how much to leave on the table on purpose if I were to do that. So one thing that's been kind of going around the campfire for the past year is the other way, and that's just artificially just reducing ownership. Okay. And what people have been using, what I've been using is this thing called geometric mean, where you figure out how many entrants there are in the tournament, how many spots there are, and then you can calculate what geo mean you need to limit your lineups to for a maximum amount of dupes. For example, okay, like we'll go to this tournament. This has 1,568 entrants, so it's a pretty simple calculation. But I will put it up on the. And again, those of you who have been with me, you've seen me do this 100 times. So it's 1,568, 6 players in the lineup. Let's say you want a max of 1 dupe. This kind of calculates for you what your geo mean needs to be in the lineup to limit yourself to 1 dupe. And if you want to limit yourself to 5 dupes, it goes up to this. But 1 dupe, it goes to this. So what you could do if you want is try to filter your lineups for a geo mean of less than 29.3. So in Saber Sim, you could do that. And you go here, and then you go geo mean, and then you go less than 29.3, and then you see what that does. And it then, kind of screws around with your lineups a little bit more, So that's another thing that you could do. And again, I imagine that you don't do this kind of stuff because you build your own models. And
yeah, I don't have the tools for that. That's really cool. Like, I don't have the tools to do that. I don't actually have the knowledge to do that. Like, that's very cool.
Yeah, and then when you factor that on top of the run contest sim stuff, I mean, this is. I mean, I honestly don't know how anybody else plays League of Legends DFS. Okay, except for me. I know Embleman wins. I know some people win. I don't know how people actually play. When I do my lineup builds, I show people exactly what I do. I aggregate all the projections. I tweak a little bit. I do whatever. I upload them, and then I run my initial builds. I run the contest sims, and then sometimes what I'll do is I'll go min uniques 2 or min uniques 3 to get a little different, and then you'll see the stack exposures a little bit more, and then I'll just fire, and I'll usually fire like 30 lineups, and then I just kind of sweat, and I just kind of root. And what I found, and this, for whatever better or worse, is that I've been able to get myself some unique lineups that have had sweats, and that's all you can really ask for. I've actually done a lot better than that, but that's not the point. You know what I mean? The point is that that's what you have to do is get yourself some kind of unique lineups that have shots. Tell me, let's. You know what? They're here. It's 10:48. I could have gone on forever. You have any takes on this? Now you put it up on your thing, and I really encourage everybody to look at his. I want to say his site, because first of all, his site's awesome. I want to talk another 3 hours about the posters and the capybara and all the other stuff. He's very, you got going on your site, but I can't get to it right now.
Yeah, you'll have me on again in the future or something. We'll talk about it. But for the slate today, it's a 2-game slate, so there's really no rules. You're just you're trying to find the best likely outcome. Mostly that's going to be just determining what you feel like is likely to happen. This is a great slate too. Like, I'm actually sad we didn't talk about it a little more because it's a wild slate. I have it as Mad Fanatic, but like my model really puts SK a lot closer than the number. I'll tell you, I bet almost every laddered version of SK. So I've got like parlays that are like SK -1.5 with Mad -1.5 that I think was like, it's good. It's a good number, for quarter units and tenth of units. Because I think SK is really live. So I'm not surprised that Saber Sims is like, I think they're going to be way under owned. I think it's a really good leverage spot. I think Mad is like, when I put this up there, price is dogs. Now I think their price is even. I think they're in a really good position, but I think everyone, and I put this in my notes, I think everyone's looking at data from the playoffs that's throwing off all the numbers, because Vitality's just been, they put Photon on an island and it's really made them look horrible on paper. So I think there's like an outcome where Vitality come out in 2-0. So like, it's a great slate in the sense that what we're looking for today is just correlation. You just want to pick your winners, try to figure out how they win, and then build a storytelling lineup that says, okay, if Vitality wins, here's how I think they'll do it. don't include Photon in that winning lineup probably. And then go, okay, in the second game, here's what I think happens. And then, so the data that I try to give people in projections is just when they determine what their story is going to be, I give them the numbers so they know how to build that lineup for that story.
Where do you bet on straight? Like where do you bet? On Bet Online, or where do you bet?
I bet through one of the largest online sports books because I currently live in a state where it's a little restricted. I'm in Utah currently, so I mostly use the Big B site because
okay.
they have most of the stuff. So
Okay.
I end up paying a little more in the end, but in the juice. But
So
that's okay.
I'm gonna ask you this, right? Do you ever? And I'm gonna get to this is my project, which I will shout it out to all the sites if they have the resource to do it, because I don't. But this has to come eventually. I'll ask you lead in with this question. You have a slate like this where you have 11 a.m. Start time for the first game and 1 p.m. for the second, or whatever your time zone is. And so you're going to know in most slates, you're going to know after the first match where you stand for the most part, right? Do you ever use the betting markets to hedge or to feed off of what you might stand to win in DFS and either, I don't know, like bet unders or do something with the betting market?
The majority of my income at this point is actually from betting and not from DFS. I don't even play that much DFS. I play every slate, almost every sport, but often it's just like I'll just put $1 in. Today I've got one in the main GPP, and that's it, one lineup. Honestly, that's been where it's at. And so far this year, since we've returned, the majority of my money my model has been very good at over-unders on kills, which you'll note I include consistently what the combined kills are for wins. And if you're picking the right winners, I think I posted a while ago that I was up almost 23 units straight up just on over-unders so far this year.
Is that good?
Yeah, it's good, man. That's real good.
That's what I always have to ask. Is that good?
Yeah. Because realistically, the over/under market should be about on the number. But at the beginning of seasons and splits, the books just don't know how to price it, and the majority of people's models are a little different than mine, and so I've been able to find a lot of space there.
So needless to say, I reading between the lines here, you think that there's probably more money. There's probably more edge in the betting markets than DFS markets.
I think that the DFS markets are a little limited because the size of the contests continue to shrink, and MMEers on shorter slates take up a higher percentage of the expected outcomes.
What about knowledge and skill? Do you think people are getting just better at DFS relative to how much better they might be getting at the betting markets?
I think the people who are playing DFS, especially league DFS, are getting sharper, and I think the tools have really improved. So as the contests shrink and the players get sharper, that really cuts how much money there is to be made. Unless you're M. Bellman or you guys are just out there doing the things that get you to the top. But for most players, this is not. I always want people to jump in because I want contests to get bigger.
Yes.
But the contest everyone should join is on the LPL, LCK slates. They should join the $5 contest. That's the team fight because it usually has a max 20. It has a payout of 1,000 up top. It's going to be the best ROI, and it has one of the lowest rakes of LOL slates. If you want to get into it, that's the one to get into.
I want to continue the end of this that question about the betting markets, because this is again my crusade. I'm going to continue to bring it up to whoever will listen. And I thought about this when I first started DFS and when I first started DFS, there wasn't real rampant sports betting everywhere. The idea that there are people that put out sports betting content, and there are people that put out DFS content, and there are now people that do both, but there's no one that puts all of it together. And the reason I mention it is that if you have, say, an opinion on something, is it better, number one, to use that opinion in the betting market or in the DFS market, for example, right? But more important is if you're playing DFS and you see how your lineups are doing, and now with tools, you can see how your lineups are really doing. Wouldn't it be a good idea to access the sports betting markets to play off of that and to hedge that a little bit. Like, for example, let's say you have a tennis slate and you have one guy left and you know that if he wins in straight sets, you're going to win a GPP for $5,000, for example. Wouldn't it be smart to play the other player in, say, set one, for example? Because if you don't win in straight sets, you're not winning. So that's something that you probably could do and should do. Do you know how much to do it for? No, but there's a tool that probably should be able to tell you that. And that tool should be able to scan all the sportsbook sites to figure out where's the best line is to hedge against whatever your lineups are. And in my perfect world, you have algorithms and sims or whatever that you'll download all your DFS lineups and it will spit out something. You have this much equity in here. You're getting a good line on this in the sports book to hedge against it this way. And it can work in football, it can work in basketball, to MMA for sure. Like if you have a unique lineup going into the last fight of MMA, that if say Joe Pfeiffer wins, you win like $150,000. God damn, wouldn't it be nice to bet $7,242 on Hermanson getting plus whatever? But what is that number? How much should you do? How much risk do you want to avoid, or whatever it is? So I do feel as though that is something that a big site, if they have the money and they want to develop it, I know bettors would want it. So that I figured out.
Well, it's a thing bettors already do, like people who are using both, and I think the sharpest people are using both. That are looking at it and going, oh, I know where my DFS lineup is, and I'm going to go ahead and hedge it because, like, I just saw this in a league a while ago. This guy Moose was like, oh, I'm going to win the 3-3-3 if this outcome happens. So he went over and bet like $3,000 on one of the teams. And so, like, we already know, like, the best people are already doing this. But yeah, a tool would be really cool. So you figure out you get somebody to develop that. And, I'll pimp that for you. I'll tell people they need to do it.
Yeah. Let me ask you a couple more questions.
Sure, man.
Okay. So
you got your lineup in? You got your lineup in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you mentioned you mentioned this site, this League of Legends site here. People, what other sites are there that are kind of cool? Like I happen to, where do you watch? I happen to watch everything on Twitch. Like, do you watch on Twitch or do you watch somewhere else?
I generally watch on the YouTube channel if it's available.
Which YouTube channel?
No, I mean, like, if we talk about like live product, like for LOL stuff,
yeah.
I'll watch it rather than watch on Twitch. I actually watch on YouTube because generally at this point YouTube actually ends up giving them more money. This is so dumb, man. Like, I think about the dumbest stuff. Because the Twitch profit model is declining. So for some of some channels are going to do better on. When I support somebody, I will think about the way that I can get them an extra penny.
Well, hang on. I'm talking about actually watching the games. Right?
Yeah.
So you tell me LEC has a YouTube channel as well?
Yeah, LEC has a YouTube channel that they broadcast live from as well. Yeah.
And LCS as well? You just got to search for LCS, LEC, YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
I think even CBLOL's English channel, I think, is on YouTube.
Okay. The other thing is that sometimes, Chan knows about this. Sometimes the live streams are like behind.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but sometimes. Is there kind of like some sneak site that you know about that keeps because a week or so ago, the American site was like a half hour behind, but I accessed the Chinese site and it was on point. Is there one sneak site that you know about that DGens that really can't wait, can get info?
You just need to know where everybody's playing. So for LPL, this is the most common one. It's basically the only league where you're going to have that level of advantage. It's because LPL play in different cities. They have like home stadiums. And so when sometimes a slate will be set up where they'll have the schedule. It's usually on a 3-game slate as well, but sometimes on a 2-game slate for LPL. Because sometimes LPL on the weekends will have 3 games. And I think this is probably the one you're referring to where they had to catch up in the middle of the second game so that they could have the third game broadcast live. And that's usually what it is if it's at a second site, that second game will start on time every time. So if you're getting close to on time and the first game hasn't ended yet, you can go to one of the Chinese sites that carries it, or now there are co-streamers right on Twitch that'll have it with English. And you can start watching that second one right away.
Where do you get also like live stats aside from drafting? Do you go to SofaScore? Like, where do you usually go to get this stuff?
I write them down while I watch it.
What's that?
It's like so embarrassing, man. I write them down. Like I keep running DFS scores when a game ends. As soon as the Nexus goes down, and this is the other reason I use YouTube rather than Twitch. Twitch, you can't go back, but YouTube, even in a live. So even when it's live, I can go back 10 seconds, pause it, and then count up the actual like DraftKings scores for each player. So before DraftKings can update, I usually know what the scores are. This is like real degen shit, man. Like it's actually
no. Listen,
embarrassing. But yeah.
Listen, if you're gonna do this, all right, if you're gonna play DFS, you better want to have fun. You better have fun. And it's got to be a good sweat. Otherwise, it's stupid. Okay, you don't have a big enough edge where, listen, I'm not like Nerdy Tenor or these guys that could put in hundreds of $1,000s worth of action and not even look and like wake up the next morning and say, oh, I did this. I want to root. Okay, I want to root. I want to watch the thing. I want to track the scores, and I want to know what I need, and I want to sweat every freaking .02 down to the end. And half the fun, honestly, of that about League of Legends is after the games end, then scrolling down and see who's going to get the GNP bonuses, and seeing what you need. Like when you watch this, like, do you like know instinctively, like midway through the second game, like, oh, who's going to be optimal? Because I have no idea. I like sort of have an idea. I have to wait till literally the game's end. Then I'm like, okay, who's still live? Who's got the 4 next to them? And then when it disappears to 0, it's still not over because now you still got to wait for the GNP bonuses and stuff like that. So you're actually writing down the stat.
Yeah. I mean, I do it mostly in my head because I just pause it on the scoreboard and then I know in my head what everything's worth, and then I just do the math and write the math down. And like to answer Bradley, yes, I do track CS because I lost Shock Blast. I think I got 2.5K. I came in second by 1 CS, and I so I'm adamant that to make sure that DraftKings gets everyone's CS correctly. That 0.02 points really sometimes makes a big difference. So yeah, but like when you're watching it, if you watch a lot and you know how the numbers work and the correlation, if you're properly assessing the game state and you know how the game's going to go, you usually can get a good feel. This is the thing M. Bellman does. Like, if you want the M. Bellman secret, what Matthew does better than everybody else is he understands how a game is going to play out, and he builds those story lineups better than anybody I've ever seen. Like, I don't know what tools he uses, but that's how he ends up on game stacks more often than most people. And he doesn't even play game stacks that much. Like, everyone calls him the game stack guy, but he doesn't even play them that much. But when he plays them, they end up at the top of the leaderboard. And it's because he just has a really good feel for the game and how it's going to play and what the teams are going to do. And it's genuinely incredible. Like, I assume it's vibes based. I know he's using some tools, but I think he plays it differently than he does like NBA, where he's spoken before about how he plays that, and I think that these are two slightly different strategies, and it's pretty incredible. So yeah.
Oh no, never in doubt, never a problem.
Yeah.
Never in doubt, never a problem.
Yeah, but yeah, it's all just tracking numbers, making the numbers work. I try to make the numbers kiss as much as possible. Like, that's the goal.
Yeah. So yeah, I disappeared for a minute. Sorry about that.
You're fine, man. You got stuff to do. Everybody has stuff to do. We're way over time.
No,
I'm good.
There's no time. I'm really enjoying it. So I actually built. Here's another tool that I'm gonna be rolling out one of these days. This is like for ultra degens only. It's like I want like a live scoring thing. that people can track on their own, so they don't have to wait for DraftKings to come in. You can go to SofaScore and get those scores, and immediately put them in a spreadsheet, and it'll tell you how much you have. But I don't know. I don't know if people even want that. Sometimes you like the surprise of when they update the game's not played to see if you actually got first or something like that. It's unlike any sport in the world. I mean, you have no DFS in the world. You have no idea whether you win, unless you're you. Like, you have no idea whether you win until it's actually final.
Oh yeah, like if I'm playing really heavy, you'll find me in at least one Discord, like halfway through the last game of the slate, being like, here are the exact outcomes that I need. Here are the exact outcomes that I need. Here's what's going to happen. Here's how I'm going to get screwed. But for most people, like, I think DGens want to know because they want the expectation. Right? We're engaged with the expectation of winning.
Well, you want another tool to put out? Okay, so after the first match of a 2-game slate, or after the third match of a 4th-game slate, or whatever, you should be able to know what to root for. You know what I mean? You should be able to tell immediately what to root for. Right? Oh, let me share one other thing with you, and I don't even know if you have this or not. Okay. Again, I just presume that you have everything I have or whatever. So, are you familiar with this site at all?
Bro, what site is that?
Okay. So this guy he actually doesn't know. He's never told anybody his real name. We call him Sports Projections. One of the sharpest guys on Twitter. Okay, and what this is a site that he created, which analyzes your lineups for uniqueness and things like that. Okay, so what you got to do? Hold on. You have to upload the contest file. All right. Hold on. So you go into. I'll show you how this works. 1 second. Let me just create this real quick. Well, I'll show you. I can show you right here. So you create the contest file, export to CSV, and we will save this. I'm going to save this as something else because I actually also track ownership projections, so I need to save this somewhere else. Ownership tracking. Okay. And then you go to here. You got to reload. Okay. So we'll put in League of Legends, LEC, and we will upload our lineups. And this is what I talk about, trying to analyze kind of how we did. All right. So now what we do is we look up user unique percentage. And what this does is this ranks everybody's lineups based on how many uniques they had. So Steve Goodman, by the way, who is a former TrueDFS original, Adam Perry, he has the highest amount of unique lineups, it looks like. Let's just see. Yeah, 22 uniques out of 47. And when I look at my own, for example, yeah, so I have, 16 that are under 5 dupes and 5 uniques. So, and it says my average salary and things like that. So I feel as though I did a poor job, right? So this is the way you analyze, you know. And then you can actually see kind of what your lineups are to see which one of those are, oops. And this, like, for example, this one shows that this line has 55 dupes on this one. So I like to go down to these, and so these are the no dupe lineups. Like, these are the ones I'm rooting for. You know, so you like know kind of right off the bat, like, these are what I'm rooting for. And so we got like DFS Chan said, Douglas captain goes off, we're in business. My man Vithio, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah. Hey, did you want to show the tab that has the information? What you've got broadcasting is a different tab.
Oh,
I don't know if you wanted to, but
yeah, I do actually.
You wanted to let people so they could see what you.
Let's do this. Let's stop sharing screen. We'll do this. Stop entire screen. Sorry, there it is. Right there.
Yeah, because this is cool. This is great information, man.
Right. So let me go back to the beginning again. So under unique, on the unique user percentage, this rates the users by how many uniques they had. So Adam Perry, aka Steve Goodman, he had 22 uniques. So this is really, really strong. And if you're a top Roto Grinders player, he kind of lists you over here. And you'll see basically the same guys up here most of the time. You know, Nick the Shtick, you know, he's almost always up here. And then you take notes of who these guys are and you want to inspect their lineups. And so like for me, you go to user entry investigation, like as I was mentioning, you put mine in here, and this lists all of my lineups based on how much they're duped. So I mean, I was hopeless. And this is a 55 dupe lineup, right? But what I can do is I can go down to these and see which one of them have only 5 dupes, 3 dupes, 1 dupes. So I know really which ones to root for, you know? And isn't that what this is all about, right? Is knowing what to root for, right? So especially when you're going to build 30 lineups. So I'm rooting for, well, I have a couple of outs here, but most of them have Vitality and SK Gaming as important parts. So, and then as things go on, if say somebody busts, you could filter your line. Let's say Eloya busts, right? Then I could separate my line. I don't want any of my lineups that have Eloya in them, and then it'll list all of the lineups without Eloya, for example. Okay, so let's see this. Yeah, so these are the ones I have without Eloya in them. So this is like my tool that I share with people, and it helps you learn. It helps you learn how to get better. If you're playing these things, you're always getting 55 dupes. You got to do something different, you know. So yeah,
it's a great tool. Like, really appreciate you giving everybody the rundown on it here.
Yeah. So listen. So I want to have you back because I want to talk about better stuff, which is all your art stuff and the posters. I think it's a lot more interesting than this stuff. But this is interesting too. Where can people find you? Is there anything you want to promote? Is there a site you charge for? Is there like a charity you raise money for? Like what can people do? If I mean you're giving everything away for free. You know what I mean? So,
I give a lot of stuff away for free. I do provide. If somebody wants to pay me to do stuff, contact me. We'll talk about what you want and what I can do for you.
okay.
I do that for some people. I provide niche products. The number one thing that people usually ask me for is my data in CSV forms, and I charge for that. I never post about it.
Good. I was going to ask if you have that. I presume you did, but you charge for it. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. And it's you know, anybody who wants to give me money, I'm happy to take your money. We'll figure out what works for you, what you're looking for. I try to make things so that they're a good fit for everybody. Because like there's a lot of players. Most of the people who follow me started following me because I was talking about like how to win on Major League Baseball free rolls, or what was the site that was up for a while? Fantasy Draft. That I crushed Fantasy Draft. People didn't understand how to play over there. Like that was a big bread and butter one for me, and they were always running free rolls. So most of the people that follow me are in the same financial situation I am, which is like we're not rich. And so when they reach out to me, I always want to make sure that I'm finding a good fit for people to help them elevate what they're trying to do. That's not going to be like a difficult thing, because the finances are the hardest part of DFS. And as we continue to see some of these things shrink, and as DFS becomes increasingly challenged by the betting markets, we're seeing some of the larger sites that became maybe a little bloated are having to shrug off a little bit right now.
Yep.
And I really just want to help people enjoy the thing that they do. And that, to me, is the number one thing. And then steal a little of their money, you know, when I can.
Well, he's a great follow on Twitter. His write-ups are easy to read, and he's a good dude. And I encourage everybody to support him in whatever way is possible. That'll do it. Thanks for coming on, Brad, and go Vitality.
Thank you very much.